Hi, everybody. It's January 16th, 2025, and this is the post Backdrop 1.30 release meeting. So we get together every week to talk about Backdrop and primarily what's happening in Backdrop Core. This week is exciting because we just had the release of Backdrop 1.30.0, which is our 31st on-time release. It's also the 10-year anniversary of Backdrop's initial 1.0 release. So it's been quite the milestone this past week. Um, my name is Nate Lampton. I'm Quick Sketch on the internet. I'm a core committer and technical lead for the Backdrop project. We've got a handful of folks here today, and we'll do some quick introductions. We'll start with Jen, and then we'll go to Martin.
Hi, Jen Lampton joining from Oakland, California.
Great, Martin, and then Luke,
Hi, Martin, Yorkshire Pudding around Backdrop, and I'm joining from Northeast England.
and Luke.
I am Luke McCormick, sell ear on various platforms, coming at you from Martinez, California, which is near San Francisco and Oakland.
Great, thank you, everybody. My apologies, I'll be muting a lot today. I've got the flu, so I've got quite the hacky cough. So apologies if I do that on the recording.
Right, impressed that you've managed to make it with the flu. You must be feeling a bit rotten.
Yeah, my temperature regulation is going crazy right now. All right, so Backdrop 1.30 released. Yeah, there were some parties and live streams yesterday to celebrate the release of Backdrop 1.30 and the 10-year anniversary of Backdrop. A coordinated effort from a bunch of folks who published this blog post about the great new features in Backdrop 1.30. There's the new backup and restore functionality that's built into update.php that makes backups of your database and config before you run updates. The streamlined login pages, which by default out of the box now use the administrative theme and look like this. But then there are also options for, zoom in a little bit, also options for tabs. This is the kind of legacy login appearance, but you can now convert those tabs to use links, which are easier to theme and style if you want to continue using your front-end theme for login. So awesome, 3 different choices for the way that the login pages now work. And this one that uses the admin theme is now the default out of the box. We added Fast Token Browser. As this blog post states, it's a lot like the previous token browser, except it's faster. The great thing is that the original token browser loaded every token on your entire site when the modal first opened. This was a common problem in earlier versions of Drupal where the tokens used to actually be on the page themselves before we put them into the modal, and it would cause stuff like the content type form to take a long time to load because it was loading all of these tokens. So we improved that a lot by using the token browser that was put into a modal. But now we've taken this one step further, and the fast token browser only loads the top level of tokens and then dynamically loads in the nested tokens as necessary. So when you click into one, it does an AJAX request and then loads in more tokens. So this makes it so the token browser loads almost instantly, regardless of how many fields or references or content types you have on your site. And then it drills down into each one. So this can be really useful on sites that have a lot of references and a lot of relationships. I've been told that commerce sites and Uber cart sites, for example, really explode your collection of tokens. And this should really help out sites that are running more complicated configurations of Backdrop.
Quick question on Token Browser. As the maintainer of the module, which is still there and will probably stay for a little while, is the best practice to do to release a new version with a dependency of less than 130?
So it shouldn't be necessary. There's this special function inside of Core called backdrop merged modules,
Mm.
the Fast Token browser has been added to that list. And
So,
when
so it won't actually let it install it anyway on that on 130. So I don't need to actually worry. I just
correct.
update the README.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So when you run update.php, it will disable Fast Token browser, the contrib module, and it will post a message as part of update.php saying that that module has been disabled and that you can now delete it from your code base. But yeah, Core won't even allow you to turn it back on once it's been disabled. Yeah, this pattern has existed for quite a few contrib modules when we merge the entirety of the functionality into Core into a module by a different name. So Fast Token Browser was a contrib module, but now it's just part of the token module that's in Core. So it's not the same name anymore. It's just been absorbed into Core. Yeah, let's see. And then we improved the homepage quite a bit in some ways minor and some ways that set us up for further changes in the future. We swapped out the default hero image has been switched out to these wavies. Configuring the hero image has been improved. There's now a preview. You can use the image browser to select hero block images, and it shows a preview now. And it's not shown in the screenshot, but the basis theme received some minor updates to improve the placement of the messages block. We're set up real well for future changes to basis. That one of the big achievements was he figured out a technical solution for making changes to basis without impacting existing sites. And so we didn't have a whole lot of time to fix issues in 1.30, so we really only fixed one issue, which was the messages, which was a big display issue out of the box with basis. That issue has now been fixed. But in Backdrop 1.31, 4 months from now, we have a lot more time and opportunities to improve and continue changing basis to fix some of the other display issues that we've got there. This menu enhancement makes it so that it used to be when you were selecting a menu item, there was only, or sorry, a parent menu item. It would show you all of the menus and all of the links in all menus in one big dropdown. And we improved that by splitting into two. So you first choose the menu, and then you choose the parent item that is a subset of that one particular location. Obviously, very valuable where the administration menu is like the biggest menu in Backdrop out of the box, and now you don't have to contend with, putting a page, a node. You don't have to scroll all the way through the entire administration menu to find, where your primary navigation is. So a nice little fix there. And then a slew of little API updates. The syntax in settings.php has changed from being a string like this for the database connection to being an array, now like this second example. And this doesn't necessarily look like an improvement at first glance, but we had multiple problems with this string format. The main one being that the password had to be URL encoded, and that was really tripping up a lot of users. That the password would sometimes contain special characters, and you had to escape those special characters. And that completely backfired the entire purpose of using a string, which was supposed to be easier if you now had to manually encode your password, which was a lot harder and more confusing. So this new array syntax sidesteps that problem. And it also conveniently makes it so that we were able to change the default behavior for emoji support. You used to have to opt into it in the previous syntax, and now you have to opt out of it in the new syntax. So we used the opportunity of the change in syntax to also change the defaults, which is great because UTF-8 MB4 support, aka emoji support, is now the standard across all databases. So it should be the default in Backdrop as well, which it is now. Let's see, Form API. The link field used to be part of link module exclusively, but now the link field can be used outside of field API and just in normal forms throughout all of Backdrop. And we improved CKEditor a little bit. We added the ability to track active instances. This is going to help the insert module insert content into CKEditor. And we also updated CKEditor 5 to the latest version. Indigo Zella was celebrating. She's been the driver behind keeping us up to date on CKEditor. Was celebrating that we managed to make it all the way from feature freeze to release, which is only a 2-week period, without any new releases of CKEditor. So we successfully released a version of Backdrop that is on the latest version of CKEditor, which seems to be a tricky feat to accomplish because they always make more releases in between when our feature freezes occur and when the releases are actually created. So that's great. One note here, this got tacked on right at the very bottom of it. And it sounds almost like it's a big deal, but I don't think it is. That the minimum version of MySQL was increased to version 5.5. We used to support all the way back to MySQL 5.0. But we discovered that 5.0 is so ancient. I think it's on the scope of, hang on, I'll just look at it here. 5.1 ceased having support 11 years ago. And then 5.0 ended support even before that. It's not even on the chart provided by Wikipedia. The driver for this was that we were unable to test these old versions of MySQL. You can't even find an operating system that will still install them. And if we don't have the ability to test it, then we don't have the ability to support it. As usual, though, I think that Backdrop's backwards compatibility policy is probably the best in the industry, that nobody is able to support versions like old versions of MySQL, old versions of PHP, and new versions of PHP, and new versions of MySQL, as well as Backdrop is. We're really stretching as far as possible to be able to support things for as long as possible while also still running the cutting edge of the latest versions of software. Which brings us to a problem for the 1.31 release. The Backdrop 1.31, which will be coming out 4 months from now, so that's April 15th. I have some goals that I'd like to achieve for that release. One of which is supporting PHP 8.4, which came out about a month and a half ago. PHP 8.4 is a particularly challenging PHP upgrade because they've changed the way that arguments are accepted into methods and functions. And the unfortunate thing is it is almost impossible to support versions of PHP prior to 7.2 and also support PHP 8.4 at the same time. Which means if we want to support the latest version of PHP, which I think everybody acknowledges that's a necessary requirement to be PHP software to run on the latest version of PHP, we will need to drop support for PHP 5.6, 7.0, and 7.1. So we're going to go ahead and give everybody a heads up that that's an almost inevitable change that's coming in. We've checked around with our peers. WordPress, for example, has increased the minimum PHP version to 7.4. I don't think that we'll jump all the way up there. We'll probably just do the minimum necessary, which is 7.2. So that's one change that we'll probably see in the months to come. The other thing I'd like to start us pursuing, I don't even think we have an issue for this yet, but we've discussed it several times, is shortening up the array syntax from the big array with a parentheses to the short just square brackets. we had a proof of concept pull request a couple of weeks ago that there's a useful script to automate changing all of the array syntax in all of our files in core all at the same time. And that seems to be totally feasible. Like just have one giant pull request that changes all of core all at once.
Would like to point out we still have not decided if this is a good idea or not.
Yeah, and we need the issue to discuss it. I'm
Don't we
saying
have
this is what,
I think
yeah,
we have one.
maybe this is unfair that I'm saying this is my personal
Preference.
objective
Yeah.
for 131. Um, because there's other aspects at play here. We've been getting diminishing returns from Drupal 7. What's the right word? Synchronicity. Being mirroring Drupal code has had diminishing returns for years now. In almost all cases, backdrop code has continued to be maintained and updated beyond what the Drupal code is doing at this point, especially in contrib. And with Drupal 7 officially unsupported now, and changes to be even less likely, the benefit of maintaining any kind of similarity with Drupal 7 is greatly reduced. I'm talking about as far as cross-applying patches. The ability for our API to be similar and for Drupal code to run easily on Backdrop is still a huge benefit. But there's not a lot of benefit in making it so that patches that used to apply to Drupal still apply to Backdrop. And changing the array syntax would pretty much, throw a big wrench in that convenience that we used to have. On the
Awesome.
other side, if we're still maintaining compatibility with Drupal 10 and 11, they're using the short array syntax.
But there's not a lot of advantage to being compatible with Drupal 10 and 11. And I also want to point out that like Backdrop is supposed to be, um, we're supposed to care about the needs of the people who are less technical first. And the short array syntax is something that like very seasoned developers appreciate, but people who are new to learning code could find really confusing. So just to sort of throw that out there, like when it says array, that's really helpful for people who are like, oh, this is an array. Otherwise being like, what do these square brackets mean? I know you can Google it and figure it out pretty quickly, but in terms of like just being able to like open a file and understand what's going on, there is some advantage to having it spelled out like that. So
Yeah, we can discuss it in the issue because I think
yeah,
there's both sides of whether or not, like how
Mhm.
it's good and how it's
yep,
bad.
yeah, for sure. And I think that most of us have feelings on both sides, but none of them are really strong. Like everybody's like, this is my preference, but I could go either way. So that also makes it really hard to decide because everybody's like, whatever's fine. So we'll see.
Yeah. So yeah, Backdrop 1.31, there's those two items, the short array syntax and 8.4 support. But then there's also the one issue that we targeted for Backdrop 1.30 that didn't get completed, which is issue 1528, which allows layout configurations to be applied to more than one path at a time. We could have rushed that one, but with the edge cases that we were still encountering right before release and prioritizing the other issues that were a lot closer, we decided to just give ourselves a break and not pursue that one for 1.30. So issue 1528 is the only issue that's in the 131 milestone at this juncture because it was moved from 1.30. So I'm really pleased with the completion of 1.30 issues that almost all issues that we slated for 1.30 we completed. It's one of our best and most comprehensive releases that we've ever had as far as setting out our goals and then actually achieving them. I think a lot of community members feel the same way. I heard a lot of people saying best backdrop release ever, uh, which I'm really glad that that's the sentiment that we have around 1.30. So a real big release for us, and yeah, a big achievement for our community. All right, looks like Tim joined us as well. Hi, Tim.
Hi.
I saw that you added I think, to the agenda, this 6657, which looks like a great topic to discuss. Were you the one that added this?
I don't think so, although I did bring up an issue. Nope, I did not add that.
Oh, okay. Well, someone did. And it's great to talk about, so we'll talk about it.
If we
Share
have
my
time,
screen and-
I do have an issue I would like to bring up for the next milestone, but go ahead.
Yeah. So this issue, I haven't looked at this one, but I understand what the sentiment is here. That we should start using these new logical quote logical properties in CSS instead of using left and right all the time. And I wonder if there's better examples of this, but the capability of CSS has improved quite a lot. Everywhere where you say left and right in our CSS, right now we have to write, there's how it is in a left to right language, like anything Latin based, but then we have to write CSS rules that are the inverse of that for Arabic and Hebrew and other right to left languages. Well, CSS has finally solved this problem, and that instead of having CSS rules that include the word left and right in them, they include values like before and after. So instead of needing to say this thing comes to the left of something, you say comes before it, and then when it's right to left, it puts it in the correct position, regardless of the overall direction of the page. This does not have a very good example in it, but I'm sure that some of these in here probably provide a lot better information. So I think it's a good concept. And this isn't saying that we should go through and remove everything that we've got right now. I think that this is saying we should just be allowed to start using it and probably put it into our coding standards as the preferred mechanism moving forward. Because I don't think we have a single one of these logical properties in our CSS code at all right now.
Laren seems to be championing this, and I think he did an experiment where he tried to do a PR to like do it throughout core. And I thought he made a comment that it would be that there was some advantage or need for that. I'm not sure though. So I'm just reporting, having sort of been watching this discussion, but not really participating.
Yeah, it would stretch our policy as far as what we change in CSS. Like if we went through 7, for example, the 7 theme, and switched it to use logical properties, because it will affect, sites that sub-theme, and people do sub-theme 7 from time to time.
And I didn't look closely at this, so I could be wrong. Which issue was that again?
It's issue 6657.
Because I don't remember if the discussion I'm thinking of was in Zulip or if it was in the issue. I'm looking now.
Oh, I see what happened here. Laren is in the document, and he might be watching on YouTube, but he's not here in the meeting.
Probably. I'm sorry. Say the issue number one more time. I'll get it.
6657.
Okay. Thank you.
Tim, you mentioned you also had another issue you wanted to bring up.
Yeah, if it's okay, it's the Jen opened the issue. Martin, who just left, has been involved. It's the alt title fields for images, adding those to the file. And the reason I'm bringing it up is I just had a client say they really, really want that, and they want to pay us to do something custom. Well, they want to pay us to implement it, so that they can. Basically, I think the idea is that the alt and title is not specific to the node, but to the file itself, or at least it can be. I believe we've discussed that that shouldn't necessarily always be the case. But anyways, Martin, Jen opened the issue. It's issue 40. Is that right? Yeah, 4007. Martin did a great, I think, sort of what do we?
Oh, I think we lost Tim there. I'll say what Tim I think was saying is that Martin went through and wrote up an excellent collection of acceptance criteria in this issue 4007, stating what it is that we would like as site owners to get from having alt text integrated into the file entities. But I think that's almost as far as we've gotten, that we structured it really well from a requirement standpoint, but there's no technical solution yet. There's no pull request. But it does look like we're starting to discuss how this can be implemented at this point, which is great. I'm going to share my screen just for a minute here to talk about this. And I might misspeak because I have not looked at this in the past couple of months, which looks like other people have been doing this real recently. Oh, good. Tim's back. I summarized what you were saying, Tim, but I was just about to get to the current suggestion of implementation.
Sure.
And now you're back.
Well, I was just outlining that my big questions are, one, what you're seeing right there, but also making sure that we're on board with this as a core issue. So, go ahead.
So, I like where Martin is heading with this conceptually. So it looks like one thing that drives me a little nuts about the newer Drupal implementations, and I think this might have existed in Drupal 7 as well when you were using the file entity or media modules, is that you had to specify a for real field, like you had to set up a text field, for example, and then assign that text field to be special and say, this is the alt text. In my opinion, using generic fields and then assigning them special behavior at the entity level is a little awkward. And this approach, I think that he's suggesting that we make a table specifically for these values and put it into that table. I find that to be a much more direct approach, that we would be able to migrate the content out of the current tables, which are stored at the field level, into dedicated tables, and then have the alt text and the title text as they are today. You can just say, do I want title? Do I want alt? Yes, no. And then the storage location is consistent and predetermined. It always goes into the same place.
Can we go over what the use case is for this? This is where you want your alt and title to be unique per node and not associated with the image?
No, it's the opposite.
Okay,
right now
so
it's that way
already though, right?
No.
Like you can already add fields to the file.
You can add fields to the file, but the alt and title fields are specified at the per node image upload.
Oh, this is specifically for image fields, not
Yes.
for image entities. Okay.
Yep.
Interesting. Yeah, so I think the way this was solved in Drupal 7 is just using inline entity form so that you could get those fields to appear on the node form, even though they were specific to the individual image entity. But what we're talking about here is building it into the image field. Is that right? So that you have access to these, because there are already those other fields on the image that aren't actually fields, right?
It would actually, yeah, it would actually be what we're looking at from this proposal, at least. It gets tied into the file entity. So
right, that's where it is already though. So I'm wondering what the difference is.
The difference is that if it was not a field and it was instead stored in a dedicated database table, then we would continue to make the UI look and work exactly the way it is now. So when you say like enable alt or enable title, it does the same thing as it does right now, with the difference that when you specify the title and the alt, that's everywhere that file is used rather than just on that one instance of where that file is
But
used.
that's already how it is. So what I'm confused is like right now in core, we already have fields on image entities. I think we also have this weird funky Drupal 7. There's these other fields that are associated with images. And I'm wondering if I think when I first opened this issue, what I wanted is to like replace the weird funky things we have on images with the actual fields on files, or to like populate a default value or something, right? Like this is left over from before we had fields on files, right? What you're looking at now.
Yep.
But if you go to the image, you can add fields on files. That's already there.
Yes. Yep.
So we
And
just
that
don't have, they're like two completely separate concepts,
exactly.
right? So
Yep.
the plan is to add a third concept.
Well, wait, hang on. It may be that we just don't understand. I didn't know what you're talking about is possible, so I'm not
Yeah, if you go to the like file types
right.
interface, there's already a way to add fields to an image.
Well,
for example,
yes, but
right?
is
And I think by default there are already like alt and title. I don't know, for a fresh install. I don't know. I have them
No,
from Drupal
there's not,
7.
but yeah,
They were there.
you can add a text
okay.
field that say
Right.
like
This
call it
is alt.
alt,
Right.
but there's
So
no way in core to say use this field as the actual alt text other than to theme the image entity
right.
and then
With
associate this field with the alt text.
right. And you can't also put content into this field unless you add something like inline entity form, right? Because the image
Right.
UI doesn't take this into effect. So I think when I opened this issue, my idea was like pre-populate the fields we see on the image field with the values from the fields on the entity, so that we weren't like adding a third concept. We were just saying take the old concept and make it work with the new data structure. But it sounds like you're creating a third data structure now that's an alternative to adding fields on the image.
No, I think yeah, it is an alternative to adding fields on the image, but it would potentially replace the field storage that right now this is tied to this one node's
Right,
card, right? That this alt text is only used, for
right,
this image on this particular thing.
right.
And if we made a new table that stored these values centrally, when you went through and you said select existing file and you selected this, it would do exactly what you're saying. It would pre-populate the alt and title text. But if you
With
change
the
it,
content from the fields on the image, or
Well,
is this a third data
yeah,
source?
it wouldn't be from a field. It would be from a table.
Not the field data table, a third
Correct.
data location. So
Yep.
can't we do this without adding a third architectural pattern?
It's
So I think this is going to get really confusing if we already have Drupal 7 pre-field and file entity, and we have Drupal 7 post file entity. And if we add like backdrops, funky alternative, we're now going to have 3 ways to solve the same problem in core.
well, one way will go away, because the data we could move from the per instance to the global. And
But
so
we could also do that moving it into a normal field structure that people know how to work with already.
the concern I have there and why I don't like that approach is that you can delete it and then it's not consistent across different sites. This is like the equivalent of giving something special, like nodes always have a title, for example. This isn't a field, which has its downsides, like you can't position them,
I
for
mean, I think
example.
like having a UI issue shouldn't demand an entirely new data structure. Like we could just make some setting that would say you can't delete an alternate field on an image entity, and then we wouldn't need another data structure. I also think like there's probably a way that we could hide the data structure from people if that's what you're worried about. Um, but I think there are use cases for like images that don't have titles. That's why that's enable, disable on the image settings,
Yeah, you'd still be able to do
right?
that.
So why have a data structure there that's not in use if you don't need it? I don't know.
It's my general vibe on this is that I think that we need to store more metadata around files centrally anyway, like the width and height of a file, for example, I
Those
feel
are fields.
needs to be stored
So
at the file level.
we already have this concept of like fields that appear on things that aren't like hook fields, extra field info or whatever it is, where we can add other stuff to the field UI to display that it like exists for the thing. I don't know if it was modern Drupal or Drupal 7 with Field API, but you can manage all of that stuff as field data also. And then it's like exposed to people in the way that they understand.
Yeah,
I'm all in favor of getting rid of the weird Drupal 7 thing if we can figure out a way to do that. But against adding stuff that's different if we already have the tools we need in core. So I would love to discuss this more. Maybe I'll go relook at the issue and see if they're like, I feel like all of the problems that you're concerned about, Nate, can be solved with the tools that we already have and probably have been in Drupal in various different ways.
yeah. What I'm generally saying here is that fields don't need to be our hammer for every data problem that we have in Backdrop. That there's a lot of other structures that nodes are a great example of that are not stored as fields, that are stored elsewhere. And that files are right now really sparse as far as their other peripheral data is concerned, right? So we've got like authoring information and time and I guess menu settings, but comment settings, like publishing status, all of this stuff is not a field. It's additional data stored in different tables on nodes. And files right now are pretty bare bones as far as storing any kind of data. And so
But
the
that's
only
because
tool we have right
they're
now is largely
distinct per
fields.
type. Like with nodes, like publishing information, like all node will have a publishing information, but like an audio clip isn't going to have a width and a height, right? And a PDF isn't going to have a width and a height. Like I think there's too much distinction between each file type to be able to make universals like that. And like alt and title, those do not belong on a PDF or a media file. They might belong on a video, but there's like a lot of file types that I think maybe it's not like having it be per type makes more sense than having it be per entity.
Yeah, there's other ways of thinking about that I don't find the idea of having sparse tables to be negative. That the table would be mostly null values and um, only the files that had applicable values for a particular column would actually be populated. Because the benefit of having all of the types share the same table gives us the ability to do useful things like in the file browser in the file browser you could find both images and videos that are in certain dimensions or that are portrait versus landscape
I don't
or
think we have any way to do that though currently. Like,
no, we don't. And it's
yeah.
not possible currently. And that's what I'm saying would be possible if we started maintaining consistent field values across all of the bundles uh, inside of files. In the same way that you can query all nodes and say what nodes have comments enabled on them, regardless of their type, because whether comments are enabled isn't a field that is different per node type and different per site. It's consistent. It's always in the same location in the same database table.
Yeah, but you have a use case for that. Like there isn't a use case for show me all PDFs that 350 pixels wide. Like that's just, it's a strange model to apply.
Yeah. Well, it wouldn't apply to some things, but it would apply to others.
Can you give me an example of something that does apply to all media types?
No, but that's not the ability for it to apply to a couple of media types, but not all of, or a couple of file types, but not all of them is exactly the point. It doesn't need to apply to all of them. It just needs to be stored in a consistent location.
Why can't the field So there's like, we're gonna lose a lot of functionality if we switch back from fields to this weird funky thing Drupal did. Like if you want to be able to like change the way you display something or use, I don't know, it's just like, I know in Drupal, we really wanted to be able to put like the file size on the file view page, right?
Yeah,
And like,
that's another great example. File size would be something that we could store globally
but
for
I
all
don't want
files.
that showing up on my images. I only want it showing up on my PDFs. And you can do that if you have a UI that you're already familiar with in the fields where you can say, show this here, don't show this here. And if we're taking away all those tools from people and saying like, Backdrop's going to do it this one way that's very rigid and you don't have any control over it. And we're doing it because we wanted all the data in one table. It just seems really strange where it's like we already have solutions to all these problems and they're already in core. And we could just move people from the old rigid structure to the new flexible structure instead of the old rigid structure to the new rigid structure.
Yeah, it's not everything we need isn't in core right now. The ability for a particular field to be considered special, non-deletable, non-renameable, and to
But that's a
enable
small
that thing,
change, right?
I don't think it's
Like,
a small change. I mean, we don't have it right now. If it were a small change, you know, we can pursue that.
okay, so let's look at that before we look at this like weird, funky alternative third way to store image data. I don't know. It just seems like that we're making this a lot harder than I think we need to, and I don't see really a reason
It sounds like,
to add it.
hi, by the way, I jumped
Hi,
on late.
welcome.
It sounds like that discussion will continue, but there's one thing that was in the issue that I think you stated differently, Nate, which was that wherever it gets stored, it would be a default that could then be overridden per use. So that it would come in by default, but you could override it for that one display or for that one node or for that one whatever, because potentially alt text could be different for the same image for different content around it.
Yeah, I'll have to see how that will work. Yeah, but let's keep talking about it and the issue. There's a lot to discuss here. But yeah, let's we're at time for today. We can wrap up. Again, great job on the Backdrop 1.30 release. I think everybody's really pleased with the outcome there.
Let
And
me insert quickly on that last issue, though, that after hearing this conversation, I'm a little concerned that it might be a deeper pool than I thought I was jumping into. So I'll listen here over the next week, but I have to make a decision. It sounds like we might be able to solve our specific use case in a different way that I had thought of.
If you want to ping me, Tim, I do this a lot.
Okay.
I can point you at some of the solutions that I've used that might
Okay,
meet your needs.
very good. That's it. No, sorry, I'm done.
okay. Well, let's wrap up for today. Thank you again, everybody, and we'll catch everybody next week. And yeah, see you then.